Good evening. Thanks so much for joining, or good evening, good afternoon, good morning, depending on where you are, where you're watching this live, or either of the above if you're watching this recorded afterwards. Thank you so much for joining. This is the first official Arrow video live stream. My name is Mike.
Oh, I'm Caroline. Hi, guys. Sorry. Yeah, super excited to be here tonight, and we're gonna get like Adam and Matt on live, basically right now to talk about ICU. So we've released the film on the 25th of May already, but I'm pretty sure you know that already, like with the Blu-ray and everything. So yeah, so now that's gonna be your chance to actually just ask the question you've had about the film, and just to get to know more about what happened like behind the scene when they were like prepping everything.
So great, just to get you in the mood, we've just got a short 25-second trailer. We'll play that now, and Adam and Matt will be with us when that's finished.
Justin Witt went missing on a bike ride last night near Jupiter Park. Park ranger found the bike. No boy.
I don't know what's happening. I'm sorry.
Great, so welcome director Adam Randall of ICU and producer Matt Waldeck.
Hi there, nice to be on.
Good, thank you so much for joining us. I hope you at home have managed to watch the film. We are going to try and stay away from sort of big spoilers. Obviously, it's a bit of a twisty-turny film. We might go into some spoiler territory, but be warned, if you haven't fully seen the film yet, there may be spoilers ahead. So, Adam, Matt, thank you so much for joining again. Tell us a little bit about your backgrounds. Adam, you've directed a couple of features now, and I know, Matt, you've been working on some feature films before. So just give us a bit of your background for us.
Sure. Matt, you want to go first?
Sure. Yeah. So I actually sort of been in the industry since I was, about 18, and I started out as an actor. And I grew up in Cleveland, Ohio, which is where we shot ICU. And there wasn't really any sort of industry presence there or anything like that. So really didn't know much about the industry other than actors and directors like any other, fan or consumer would. So got myself to LA and sort of tried to say yes to everything, and eventually found my way and ended up at a company called Low Spark Films. They did a film called Kings of Summer, Take Shelter.
Take Shelter. I love Take Shelter.
The Signal, Compliance, really great directors, Greg Zobel and, William Eubank. And so anyway, worked there for a bit and then branched off and started Zodiac Features with my partner, Ben Hecht, who is a college classmate of mine. And so this film, ICU, was the first film that I was, a lead producer on. So it was a really amazing and intense experience. So
cool.
Yeah.
Adam, yourself, you're actually from the UK, aren't you?
Yeah, I'm from London, I went to Westminster to study film and sort of stormed out of there thinking I was Martin Scorsese, and then cut to 12 years later and still haven't made a film. But I made a lot of short films and just struggled to make a living and try and get a feature made. And then I managed to make my first feature, which is a film called Level Up, which was incredibly low budget. I mean, ICU was low budget, but Level Up was tiny compared to it. It was about 400,000 we made that for. And then I made a film called iBoy, which about 8 weeks before we started shooting became a Netflix original, became the first UK Netflix original. We didn't even quite know fully what that meant at that point. It was just starting up. So I made that, and that got me over here in a way to LA, in terms of meeting people and making connections. But really interestingly, ICU didn't come through that at all, even though it's a US film. It came through the sales agent, who's called Bankside, based in the UK. And they sent me the script. And it was one of those, seemingly incredible situations in which I was given the script and told, it was fully financed. They wanted to shoot it in 10 weeks. Could I read it and get back to them as soon as possible? I read it. I thought it was incredible. Read it again the next morning, spoke to Matt. We got on really well. We both completely agreed on what it could be and what it should be. I I came on board on that phone call, you know, and then everything was sort of flying. And then, you know, as is the case with independent films, problems occurred, you know, and that was the summer of, or like spring of, what was it, 2017. And then we shot it. It was about a year later. So it sort of all fell apart. And then we built it back up again.
Yeah.
No, that's terrific. So yeah, it was the script that drew you in, was it? What was it about the script that sort of captured you?
You know, I mean, it's you know, the whole spoiler thing is going to be difficult, I think, for this whole conversation, because the film is basically a series of massive twists. You know, the press at South by Southwest, I mean, it was just nonsensical. We couldn't really say anything at all. But the halfway point is obviously such a, you know, it was slightly different to how it is in the film and the script, but it was still a jarring, amazing thing. So structurally, I found that, you know, obviously. And it was just so well written, and so the characters I thought were so well drawn. And then also I remember, you know, after reading it, you know, I read it, you know, in the afternoon, and then I was lying in bed that night and I was thinking about it, and everything was sort of falling into place. And I suddenly realized, oh, that's why she did that. And that's, you know, to have that sort of living with you that long after it, even the next day still thinking about it, and realizing how all of your judgments, everything you assumed in the first 5, 10, 15 pages you got wrong, and then sort of putting that to your own life, you know, when you meet someone and you know, these judgments we make, you know, and how, you know, ultimately that's sort of what I thought the film did so well, the script did so well, was sort of you know, making you really question those judgments.
Cool.
Yeah, and I had so my company Zodiac Features, we actually acquired the script in July of 2015. And it had been sort of around the block in Hollywood for, I think, probably 2.5 years. And a very, you know, some really talented filmmakers and powerful producers had been attached to it previously. And then that sort of stopped, and we were able to move in and acquire it. And yeah, without spoilers, I think the structure was something that we recognized as being very commercial and very fun, you know, potentially for audiences if executed properly. And so, you know, the screenwriter Devin Gray, he's also a first-time screenwriter. So, you know, we got Adam with his first U.S. film, and me as the first lead producer, and Devin with his first screenplay. A lot of new voices, you know, which I think it was exciting for everybody. But one of the things that we really changed was sort of making sure that we had sort of executed these different genre sort of elements in the film. So we really wanted to make it feel like a supernatural horror film, and, you know, and Adam then followed those sort of leads then with obviously his own sort of visual vocabulary, which was what was so key to everything, of course, you know, to making it work for the audience.
Yeah. You know, I think, you know, obviously structurally and in terms of story, it's really interesting how it plays. But as a filmmaker, you know, I doubt I'll ever get an opportunity again to sort of retell a story using different genres, you know, within the same film, using a different, you know, aesthetic and different camera work and different lighting, and, you know, retelling literally the same scenes but using different elements. You know, it was so much fun in that way. It was a real puzzle to kind of figure that out.
Yeah, and that wasn't exactly on the page when we first got it. It was something that we had to move a few pieces around. You know, obviously Devin had it all, you know, essentially there, but just moving a few pieces around, sort of drawing out the reveals a bit further, so that we can enjoy the payoffs a bit more, and sort of kind of keep the air in the balloon a little bit longer, right? And build the tension. So that was really key, I think, to making the script commercial and helping it to get made.
It's a very layered film. You know, I've watched it a couple of times more this week, and you notice things on the second and then the third viewing that then make more sense after having seen it first. I love a film like that. It's terrific how you've managed to get everything across. And I think the style choices, as you say, you've got different sort of genres being mixed about there. And I watched it with my flatmate, and she said it was very Lynchian to start with. And you know, what were your sort of influences? Did you take a range of influences? Did you approach different styles differently?
Yeah, I mean, it felt sort of like there was a kind of organic way of telling it, you know, and Lynch definitely was a massive. I mean, I just, you know, I'm obsessed with him anyway, you know. But for this film, you know, Lost Highway was something that I watched. You know, it's probably my favorite Lynch film anyway. But I watched it, you know, a few times leading up to it. Twin Peaks, obviously, in terms of the small town Americana, and you know, and then also thinking about, I remember talking to Matt about True Detective season 1, you know, and you know, that sense of the sort of supernatural, whether it was or wasn't, it had that feeling about it, you know, and that kind of slow burn feel. Yeah, and then looking to, I guess, you know, a kind of Hitchcock film as it evolves, you know, in the second half particularly, you know, and maybe sort of like, you know, some early Polanski and that sort of, you know, and all about the kind of ramping up of tension, and you know, so they were the key things, I think. You know, what else we talked about? Gone Girl a little bit. There's obviously a little bit of that.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think probably I watched rewatched Prisoners last night, and I was surprised that it reminded me a lot of our film in a few ways, which was a film that I was a big fan of when we were really, you know, deep into development on this. So I think some of that probably creeped in as well.
In a way, the film, and I think, you know, we definitely chose you. We sort of embrace the cliches. It's like,
oh yeah,
you've seen a film about the grizzled detective or TV show, you know, and the kids going missing and the tough home life, and really play into that. And in a way, it's like, you know, if people watch it and they think, oh, I've seen this, good, you know, that's
right.
Go into that comfort zone, you know, so that we can then disturb it later on. So we definitely have fun with that. We rewatched Black Christmas, you know, the
original.
Remade by that point, I think, you know, which had certain elements that are useful.
Yeah, and that was Devin's, I think, main inspiration was Black Christmas, is what he said, the original. Yeah, and so I think all of that sort of played into the development. And I'd say the thing that stuck with me the most was David Lynch and Lost Highway. You said that a lot.
Yeah.
So how did you, in the end, manage to get things turning? You say it was brought to you by Bankside, you know, great sales company over here. So they came to you with it, and what was the step procedure to get things rolling? It took, you know, a year after you came on board before you were shooting. Was Helen Hunt a big thing in coming on board? How did it?
She was already sort of loosely attached, depending on the director. You know, obviously, you know, she really loved the script, and she's spoken to Matt. So I met with her, you know, very quickly after I came on board, and then she was, you know, keen. And I think the concerns she had were the same things that I wanted to sort of develop, and you know, so we were very much in line on that. So that worked out. It's just you know, in terms of why it didn't work out, I think it's incredibly difficult to make a film, basically. And a film, you know, based on a comic book, really, like, to make anything now, you know, independently is incredibly difficult. And this film, I think, is a hard film to sell, because you can't sell what it actually is. You can only sell what it sort of pretends to be. And what it pretends, as I just said.
We've just found that, Adam. How do we sell this film?
And it relies on cliches we talked about. So you're basically selling something that people will think, oh, I've seen that before, you know. You can't actually, well, it's all about word of mouth. And that's what we found has been, you know, so interesting about it. And it's been a sort of slow burn, you know, over here particularly. You know, people sort of discovering it and then telling people about it, but more saying, you should watch this film. I can't tell you anything, but you should just watch it. And that's the way it's sort of been. But in terms of piecing it back together so we could shoot it, I mean, that's more for Matt to say, because that's more on the finance side.
Yeah, but to your point, though, I think the whole idea of that we're sort of touching on these genre tropes without actually committing to one of them, that's what really unlocked, I think, the movie critically. There was our you know, we world premiered at South by Southwest in 2019 on March 11th. We were lucky, unfortunately, all the filmmakers this year, you know, it was shut down because of the COVID pandemic, unfortunately, but we were lucky. And we had our first sort of, I thought, really strong review from Tasha Robinson at The Verge. And she was the first person. And if you remember, Adam, we sort of chatted with her before the screening. She was the first person that really got it to be a puzzle film, where every object is important. And, you know, Adam, you've talked about this previously, that it's pretty dark tonally, but sort of the joy and the satisfaction that you gain from it is the puzzle and solving the puzzle. And sort of, you know, we were getting a few reviews that were saying, you know, that we're trying to be Get Out, or we're trying to be another film that is, you know, a hard genre thriller, but we're really playing around with perception and point of view and genre. And I think that's what makes the film, what Adam has done here, really special, because he's managed to, you know, flip not only point of view, which we've seen before, you know, not only play with temporal elements, which we've seen before, like Memento, but changing the actual genre of the film with the POV shift and the temporal elements. I honestly, I don't, you know, Adam and I are friends already, so I don't need to do this, but I don't think I've ever seen it before, frankly. And I think that's what makes the film special. And I think, you know, film students and screenwriters and people, you know, working to tell their own stories, I think they should look at this as a really well executed exercise in those elements.
I mean, actually, when we came out of the premiere, I mean, I remember feeling so elated, like, you know, it went down really well and everyone. And then the first few reviews that came through, which were like blog reviews, like really just shout on the film. And I remember, that's it then. That's it. It's over. You know. Yeah.
It was a dark day. That second day was kind of tough, but
that was tough. Yeah.
Yeah, but once people started to understand what we were doing, and again, it kind of, you know, the film hadn't been marketed at all. Even from, you know, the first ever press release that I was crafting with Bankside, the foreign sales company, it was all a misdirect. We started misdirecting people, you know, since 2015 when we did our first sale. Right. So it's not like people understood what they were going into. And I think there was a little bit of a learning curve to sort of step back and understand what we were actually trying to accomplish. So obviously now, you know, we've gotten overwhelmingly positive reviews, and, you know, the Hollywood Reporter off of our screening at Edinburgh, and then Daily Variety and the LA Times in December before the US release on December 6th also, you know, really reviewed the film well. So I think it's found its way. And as I've mentioned, in the US, it's been the #1 horror film on Amazon Prime for 8 weeks straight.
That's amazing.
So
you can tell who the producer is here.
I'm still selling.
And we had a review on December the 6th. It was ingrained in my head. The reviews here have been fantastic. You know, you've seen the Times full page review was phenomenal, and, you know, we've had great reviews across all the papers.
Yeah.
Caroline, I know you had some good questions. Do you want to jump in?
Yes, I do. I do, because you stole mine earlier. But,
Oh.
No, I was gonna ask, do you want to talk about like how went the shooting and everything? Because I think you've had like a pretty like tight schedule, or like with loads of delays and everything, and then your shooting schedule actually had to be like reduced, or all those things. Like, how did you manage that, especially with the actors and all that things? And for you, in terms of preparation, how did that impact it? Like, obviously, your work and the way you've planned it originally.
Sure. I mean, yeah. So it was going to be about a 24-day shoot, and then I remember about 2 weeks before the shoot, trying to persuade everyone that 24 days, and then we get an extra couple of days to shoot just extra bits that we needed, you know, a couple, you know, and I really thought I sort of was going to win that. And then I remember being in a meeting and Matt saying, I need to chat to you. And we went out to the car park, and he said, we need to cut it down to 20 days. And this was about a week before we were shooting. I mean, you know, when you're already shooting 24 days, I mean, it's probably down to a 4-week shoot. So, and we sort of stood there chain smoking and figuring out how the hell we were going to do that, you know, and so, you know, we needed to go back to the script, and we streamlined it in a lot of ways. You know, we took Connor's story, we made that much simpler. There was a whole subplot of him at school and his relationship with Justin's sister. So we got rid of all of that, and we looked at other things, you know, especially in the third act, that were sort of, you know, elements that were making it slightly more of action, you know, with Spitsky sort of racing to get to the house. And, you know, we sort of streamlined that. But what I really, really tried to do was, you know, I'd shot list the whole film, you know, completely, because, you know, I like to do that anyway, but particularly a film like this, because it's so specific. You know, everything means something, and everything you're going to look at later, and it's going to, as you say, hopefully if you watch it 2 or 3 times, you start to notice these things. And so I really didn't want to lose anything. You know, I didn't want to lose a shot of a bulb turning on inside a fridge, you know, or all these little close-ups that seemingly didn't really mean anything, but I felt like they did, because they helped create the tone and the atmosphere, but also, you know, the puzzle. So one of the ways that we sort of fought against this tight schedule was we had a 3-man camera team with us as well. So we had our main unit run by, you know, Philip Lauback, and then we had a Steadicam camera operator, you know, who's from LA, came over, called Grant, and he came over with a focus puller, you know, and an assistant, and we always had them in another room getting these shots. So I'd be with Helen and John doing the main scene, and then I'd go into the kitchen where we were setting up for a shot of a beer can opening or something, you know, and that was like shooting like Kubrick, you know, spending 4 hours getting a shot of a beer, while meanwhile we were rushing to shoot, you know, major scenes. So that way, you know, we got to the edit with sort of pretty much what we needed. So that sort of worked out in that respect. But there was obviously, things were often had to be rough. Things were simplified. You know, there was some really sort of painful things. And, you know, the last day of the shoot, we shot all of the stuff in the woods, which is a lot of stuff. You know, and we shot for 17 hours. You know, the sun had already come up and we were just shooting anyway. We had to get it. There was no wiggle room at all. So yeah, so it was, you know, there's pain to it, but also I think there's a lot of good that comes out of those things. You know, part of the joy of filmmaking is you have these problems and you need to solve them. And you think now, like, did we need a story? Did we need a subplot about Connor at school and his relationship? Probably not. You know, there was scenes that we did shoot, like Jackie doing a therapy session, you know, that when you get to the edit, you're like, we just don't need this. I don't want it. You know, I really want to distill what this film is and get rid of this. So in that way, I think it was, you know, potentially quite a helpful thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, I mean, it was heartbreaking, you know, as a producer, just because we talked about it for a year plus. And you've got a lot of positive momentum, and 100 things, you know, need to go right in order for it to work anyway. But unfortunately, the one thing, what ended up causing a big sort of reasoning for reducing the days was we were shooting on location in Cleveland, Ohio, and we were sort of sandwiched in between 2 other films. And one of the other films was a higher budget, so higher wages. So most of the crew in town moved on to that picture. And so we ended up having to fly in, I'd say, you know, 70% of the crew, I would think. So all of the per diems and lodging and rental cars and everything like that sort of just added up, which is heartbreaking because it's not necessarily the creative stuff that we really want to be sinking resources into. But Adam was, you know, more than a good sport about it. And I think also, though, you know, we made sure that you were still going to, that the film was still going to be able to be executed in the way that you were going to be okay with, I think. Right. I mean,
you know, we had great crew, you know, great HODs, you know, the cast were fantastic, and they knew going in that there was a guerrilla kind of element to this film. They knew it was going to be a life of luxury, you know, really tried to protect as much as possible so that we had time to play around and you know, I mean, that's what, you know, it would have been great to have had more, because I think that's where we would have had the time to have been able to try different things and then change the performance. But I hope that, you know, that they felt that they did have that opportunity, you know, to do that. Mm-hmm. You know, there were obviously times where that didn't quite work, you know, mainly to do with like the sun going down. You know, we shot a scene set 8 o'clock in the morning and we shot it at 9 o'clock at night, you know, so like there's only so much light you can blast, especially when you haven't got huge lights, you know. Yeah. So, you know, those sort of things you can't do anything about. But on the whole, you know, it's difficult to look back at it, and you know, it was a great experience. It was, you know, I always think films is just such a joy. There's always problems, but it just depends whether you get affected by them. Really, we're so lucky to be making them. You know, to be sort of moaning and complaining and getting in a bad mood about it feels ridiculous. You know, you just deal with it. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and we had a bond company, so it's like, I mean, I was very close to getting fired off the show, and if we weren't able to shave those days down and make the budget work, it would have been trouble. So I'm glad that it worked out.
Yeah. Thanks God you didn't get fired then. So
yeah, that would have been a real shame.
Yeah, that would have been a problem for the film.
Yeah, that would have been a real shame.
It kind of ties into a question we've had come in from Daniel Jansen. Matt, I have a question. Would you personally say that independent films are more interesting than big budget Hollywood films?
Yeah, I saw that pop up here. No, I think they're two totally different products. If you're going to see something in the MCU, Marvel Cinematic Universe, then obviously there's a certain expectation with what that's going to be. Certainly our film, I think, it's interesting for me because you can take a lot of risks. This film is a total risk, right? The structure, the format is a complete risk, and you can give a filmmaker an opportunity to really express their vision, I think, a lot more than if you're working through a studio. So I think I wouldn't say that they're more interesting. I think there's just an opportunity for innovation and risk-taking that's present in the independent space, more present in the independent space than, say, when you're making a real product that has a large corporate structure and shareholders that you need to answer to. I think it's just only logical that you would be able to take more risks as an artist in the independent space and really low budget. If you made a low budget film, I think you can obviously take a little bit more risk.
I take it you'd like to do a big budget though one day.
Yeah, definitely.
Not that you haven't, but a Marvel budget.
Yeah, that would be. I think probably I'm most jealous of what Blum gets to do with the Universal monster universe. I'd say that's what I'm most jealous of right now.
Cool. Another question in from Scott Brown. Have you any advice for someone making a film involving a great deal of makeup and practical effects?
Well, apart from getting incredibly good makeup artists, effects, I mean, I think it's great to try and achieve it like that. I think a lot of people rely now on VFX. I've relied on VFX, and it's a very easy thing to do to say, oh, we'll sort that out later on. I think trying to do it practically, we did, a fair amount practically, and then enhanced it. I think it's just, making sure you've got the time beforehand. I think everything, particularly with low budget, is just having time to prep, and having time to work things out with people and really experimenting and trying things. Because once the train starts going, you can't stop it, and you're always fighting time. And there's 1,000 things to be dealing with, things that you wouldn't have even considered to be dealing with. So suddenly that idea that you had that was so important, like the SFX or the makeup, that you've been dreaming about for a year, for 5 years, on the day, suddenly you haven't even thought about it because you're dealing with the fact that it's pouring with rain, and you're trying to cut with the scene where it's sunny, or whatever it is, or the actor's unhappy. So I think, to really try and figure that out in prep and to get everything perfectly ready and to have great collaborators.
Very much so.
I think I got another question here. Do you guys have another project lineup, separately or together?
Well, I'm actually in the middle of a film at the moment. I shot about 3/4 of it in New Orleans, and then we had about 2 weeks left to shoot in LA, and we flew back to LA, and that's when everything shut down. So we're just waiting. We did about a month's editing, and now we're just waiting for it to reopen. So we're hoping to go back to it, late summer.
What is the current climate like then? Because where are you based at the moment, Adam? Are you out in LA?
Yeah.
Yep. And what's the current vibe of getting back on set, as it were?
It's a strange thing because today officially LA County said you can start shooting again, and yesterday was the highest COVID toll that they've had since it began. So none of it really makes any sense. Everybody's you get the sense that people are sort of like life's back to normal, and yet it's much worse than when we all locked down.
Yeah.
So I mean, I think there's certainly a feeling of like we can't just keep in our houses forever. I mean, I think a lot of people here, you know, I mean, you know, like us, you know, I got back and it was about a week before the official lockdown, but we didn't leave the house. You know, no one really was. People were very accepting of it then, but I think now there's a sort of, you know, a feeling that we sort of needs to go back. And then I think with film, it's just very difficult because films, you know, are, you know, 50, 100, 200 people in small places. It's all about, you know, being with other people. And so it's a difficult thing to do with something like this. You know, I'm hoping that with the, you know, everyone wearing masks and social distancing and cleaning sets and, you know, that we can, you know, we'll be able to go back as, you know, sooner rather than later.
Yeah. And that project you're doing, you know, through the studio, through Netflix, right? So
yeah.
From the independent point of view, you know, the biggest thing is going to be, are you going to be able to obtain a production bond, and sort of connected to that, are you going to be able to get insurance? Most of the big insurers right now are saying they wouldn't be covering, you know, COVID delays. And right now, people I've talked to, you know, we're looking at a probably 30 to 40% increase in the budget, just in terms of the, you know, prophylactic measures that you'll need to take in order to resume production. So, you know, when your margins are already pretty razor thin, that's a real hit. So we're focusing more on documentaries right now. So a project that I had sort of moving in the last about 18 months is it's a documentary about a guy named Ricky Jackson, who was the longest held exonerated prisoner in U.S. History. So he was in prison for 39 years. And so it rubs up against a lot of, you know, obviously relevant issues right now that we're talking about with, you know, the prison industrial complex and you know, sort of the ethical questions that are coming home to roost, you know, appropriately, finally, right now, certainly in America. Yeah. So we're working on that just with smaller crew, and we can, you know, we think that we'll be able to create product and content with the restrictions and without. So in terms of narrative features, you know, we had a project called Dead Reckoning, which is sort of a wilderness survival film, but that's, you know, basically just on hiatus.
Right. Well, obviously, you know, we're all hoping it all gets back to normal soon, and yeah, we can get on with new projects. Moving back to ICU, there's a question here for you, Matt. I think, you know, would be a good one. What were some of the benefits and challenges of filming in a smaller location such as Cleveland as opposed to LA or New York? Yeah.
See, that's Greg Lucan's a friend of mine. So thanks, Greg. Thanks for the question there. Thanks for the softball.
You're born and bred in Cleveland, though, aren't you?
I am, yeah. And we actually filmed ICU only about 2 miles from where I live.
So was it always intended to film there? Was it scripted there, or did you decide to move it to Cleveland for the film?
Yeah, so that kind of rubs up against Greg's question. So it was important that we filmed in Ohio, number one, because I didn't really know how to pull it off in LA or New York. You know, so I figured that we were going to end up needing a practical house, which was Adam and I talked about that early on.
Such a good house.
Yeah. So Adam was still in London, and then I was just going on Zillow.com and looking at houses that were for sale or for rent or any way I could really find them. And then I was taking pictures and sending them back to Adam and one of his colleagues who was maybe going to be DOP on the film. And we were on maybe our 8th or 9th house. And Adam, you can talk a little bit about sort of maybe what the specs you were looking for with the house as it relates to you know, the shoot.
Yeah, I mean, the house is and obviously the house is like one of the main characters in the film. And I originally wanted to build the house because it's so specific what it needs to be, and that was dismissed very quickly.
Why not?
Yeah, definitely we'll build the house, Adam. Of course we will.
With a beautiful view of a lake. It'll be easy, no problem.
Yeah, we need a practical house. So what was really obvious for me, like, is that the house needs to be big, right? And it needs to be open plan. And that's, you know, really so that we have the freedom cinematically to be able to tell the story in an interesting way and for it not to feel really confined, because we're shooting 80% of the film in this house. Interestingly, that's sort of rubbed up against the story, because why would they have this big house? You know, like he's a cop, she's therapy, like, why have they got this giant house? And so actually then we put that into the script, we decided, well, actually, could that be something that's a sort of wedge in their marriage, and I think it's something that worked incredibly well, Greg's motivation particularly. So it needed to be big, it needed to be open plan so that I could shoot in, a variety of ways, particularly in the first half, I could give a sense of sort of observing this family, and to be able to shoot through doorways and through spaces, so there's a sense of someone watching, and also just so that you could then flip perspectives later on, or just pan a little bit to the right and you're looking into another room and you see something different than you were expecting that changes everything. So it was that, and then I really wanted to use the lake because it's just so incredible. Coming from the UK, when we have a lake, it's a lake, right? It's a fucking ocean. It's like, it's unbelievable. And for it not to just be another sort of suburban set film, but to have its own sort of identity, I thought the lake was really interesting. And then also just for that kind of sense of isolation, Jackie, putting her against this. And then to use that lake in different ways, for it to be tranquil and beautiful, and then really menacing in the background. So they were the different things. And so Matt was sending these photos, and then he sent this one house, which looked great, but then I went out and saw it a few months later, and it presented a lot of issues, as well as it being, okay, well, we've got to use this, we're never going to get better. But it didn't work with the script. The script was so specific. For example, there's a scene in which Greg, in the original script, he's shaving, he throws his razor through a window, it lands on a roof that connects to the guest room. It's like that specific, so that it works. And then you realize, well, there is no window in the bathroom in this house, and the roof isn't on that, and the guest room, there isn't a guest room in that way. So then you're actually rewriting the script, to fit with the house. And again, it sort of helps, because then it's like, oh, well, maybe he throws a phone. And what if Jackie calls him and it helps, and so you start to play around with things like that. So, a huge part of the rewrite was to do with this house.
Yeah.
I've got a picture of it up there. Yeah.
Yeah. Nice. Yeah. So I would say, just to get back to Greg's question, a challenge of shooting in Cleveland, I'd say, is just the depth of the crew. The crew caliber is good and high, but if there's 3 movies at one time, shooting in Cleveland, then there's just not enough crew in order to fill out, all the departments. So that was a real challenge. But on the flip side of that, there's a really great motion picture tax credit in the state of Ohio that was a big part of our capital stack for financing the film. So that obviously we wanted to utilize that because it added about 33% to our budget. So that's obviously a huge number. And then just in terms of shooting it in 20, we didn't know we were going to shoot it in 20 days, but just sort of the favors that you would kind of call in, or the goodwill that you receive when you're filming in a place like Ohio that is not New York or LA, where people are used to it, or there's a bit of cynicism sort of around production just because it's disruptive and all those types of things. It was very much a unique and novel experience for the people that we were filming sort of next to or near to. And that created a great environment, I thought, that really trickled into the production. Because, a big part of Adam's and my job is creating an environment for everyone to do their best work and be successful. So I think even though we did have sort of a truncated production window, it never really felt too rushed, maybe other than a few days, I felt like. And a lot of that had to do with filming in a place like Cleveland, and specifically that neighborhood where, they opened up their homes to us for additional dressing rooms or green rooms. And I think they even hosted like an open bar one night, the neighbors did for us, and we treated them to barbecue. So there was a lot of like reciprocative stuff going on, and it was like our own little studio backlot there, which, it was something I won't forget. And I'm sure, I hope I never have to do it again, but
it sounds like a nice way to be. No,
but it was a unique experience. So yeah, so I think that was something that was special about filming in my hometown.
I just put down like a very cool question on the score, because I've seen like a couple of comments. If you want to talk about the score and the music in the film.
Yeah, I see this question from Daniel. Is there more important detail. I don't think there's anything more important than music. That's not to say that music is more important than the cinematography or the sound design, but I don't think it's lower. I think it's so hugely important in most films. You know, and you know, particularly something like this where it creates so much of the atmosphere, so much of the fear, and the identity of the film. You know, and music, one of the very first things I think about when I read a script and I put a sort of playlist together and start dreaming of the film, listening to music. So it was hugely important. And unlike my other films and the film I'm currently working on, this was always going to be almost totally score. I think there's 2 tracks in it. One that's repeatedly used, you know, on the vinyl, and then there's the end credits. Apart from that, it's all score. So we, you know, I had a great music supervisor called Will Quiney, who I know well, and he and I talked about it. And there were some electronic artists who I really loved, and we got them to demo. And he brought up this guy called Will Arcane, who I didn't know, but he sent me some of his stuff, and it sounded really great. And then I sent him a sequence, which was the search party, starting in the basement, and then the search party, and then the bit in the woods that I won't say, I don't want to spoil anything, and he did this sort of 6 minutes temp score for it. And just to say how good it was, is that what's in the film now is pretty much that. You know, it was like I was frightened watching it, even though I shot it. You know, it was really, I just thought it was incredible. And so I chatted to him for you know, a long time about the sounds of the film and what the music was trying to do, and it being like a kind of narrator in a way, and it tying together the 2 halves. And Will, he does things like he'll send me some sounds and he'll go, "This is a clothes hanger that I smashed into a piece of bamboo. What do you think?" Like, what the fuck are you doing? But it's you know, then you're just like, I've never heard anything like that, and it's like haunting. You sort of taking these sounds and ideas and then laying them in, and then we're talking about, well, whose sound is that and how can that work? And I'm really working on it in that way, really organically. I just think he did it. You know, it's his first feature. You know, I think he'd done a documentary short before and some trailers. We'd never done a film, and I think he, you know, I really thought it was just a remarkable job.
So it's the sign of a good sound designer who can bring a sound from 2 random objects that you've not thought of before, and there's a brand new sound.
Yeah.
It was a film of firsts, really, as well, because I wanted to talk briefly on the drone photography. And I understand that was a first feature film drone operator as well. The drone photography is becoming a little bit more of a trope in genre, but I think what happened in this film, it's fantastic drone photography. The way you've used it, the sort of the floating feel, it's been much more inventive than has been normally used in genre films. How much of that was, you know, influenced by your cameraman or camera operator?
Well, that was, you know, really key. You know, that was one of the things I fought very hard for when we knew we had to make significant cuts, because it was a large part of the shot list. Was, you know, it was very key, you know, those top-down shots, you know, because I thought of the film a little bit like looking at a board game, you know, or a puzzle, you know, and so I liked cutting to that perspective. So, you know, a lot of those, ideas were in there initially. And then, you know, because of the budget, we didn't get like normally you get at least a 2-man team, maybe a 5-man team, you know, and we got a local guy who mainly did, I think, you know, did sports and he did weddings. But he was brilliant, you know, and in a way, because he did sports, we were able to do some crazy things. And so there were a lot of things that were set, and but here's the shots we need, particularly in the last, you know, 5 minutes of the film, and then those shots of the house. But certain things, you know, we sort of played around with. And I'd sort of be on the way, you know, I'd be driving to the house every day, and we'd be driving down the street towards the house, you know, and I thought, you know, I'd love the camera to speed towards the house. You know, I'd love it to really speed towards the house.
Yeah, that's a great shot.
Operators, you know, would be nervous of that because it's you've got to stop it. You know, if you don't stop exactly right, you know, you're going straight into a lamppost. But because he was chasing cars and stuff as his day job, you know, with a drone camera, it was something he was able to do relatively easily. So, you know, yeah, I think, you know, that was great. So in a way, again, because of the budget cuts, you know, we ended up in a different route, which worked out, I think, for the film.
Question here from Michael Carney. What inspired the story? And I guess we could touch on frogging on this, because that's a really interesting angle. And How easy was it to construct the story? Or was the mystery built in the ending? So yeah, what inspired the story, and how easy was it to construct? Was that and how much of that was in the editing?
Really, Devin, he heard about frogging, and that's where it all came from initially. In terms of like my knowledge of frogging, I thought it was something, when I heard the word, much more disturbing than what it ended up being. And obviously you've heard about, I don't know you, but I'd heard about stories of like an ex-boyfriend who 6 months later she realized he's still living in the house, or a homeless man every day she got, and some of her food was missing, or things like that. But I'd never heard of it in this way, in a kind of almost blogging way, or as a challenge. That was something completely new. So I don't know, Matt, do you know a little bit more about Devin's inspiration?
Yeah, so he the idea came because I think he wrote this. I think he wrote it in like 2012, 2011. He wrote it a long time ago, but it was something that he was working with his manager on, and his manager had heard of frogging, sort of gave Devin I guess a kernel of an idea, and then Devin came up with this idea of the POV shift because he liked the idea of I think there was a film, Don't Breathe had come out, which is sort of in the same arena, so he wanted to figure out a way to tell both sides of the story. So yeah, without going into spoiler territory, I would say that was pretty much the sort of the inspiration for it.
But in terms of the second part of that question was it found in the edit? And kudos to Devin, really, like the key structure, the reveals were all in the script that I read. That's all down to him, really. There were certain things found in the edit. The way that shift happened halfway through in the script was very different. It involved rewinding through the film and freeze frames and cut. We so sort of stylistically in the effect of it. But really, because the script was so specific, and then we worked out and shortlisted and figured it all out so specific, the edit wasn't about finding it in that way. It was about finding the characters in the moment, but it wasn't about finding the mystery.
The mystery reveal. Question from Alan Simmons: the house is really important. Was it real or a set or a combination? Was there any set at all in the film? No, it's all genuine location.
Yeah, it would have been great. No, there wasn't at all.
The only build was there was a false wall that was built at the bottom of the basement stairs. So yeah. And then behind that was all hair and makeup.
The house, in terms of aesthetically, we changed it a lot, and then we repurposed it, and the guest room where Greg sleeps, and you find out isn't the only one up there. That was a completely. When I went in there the first time, there were all sort of hunting trophies all over the wall, with dead animals everywhere. We changed it all, and we painted everything. And gave it all a very different feel. And again, it was because going into that room, because that wasn't supposed to be the room where you'd find the Froggers. But I remember just going up there and then finding that cupboard, and then sort of thinking about that, because originally in the script, I think it was on the same floor as all the bedrooms, and so again, it had an effect on the script, which I think is different to most films in that you work if you've got the budget, you'd work the locations or sets to fit your idea rather than the other way around. But I think that is low budget filmmaking. You find something and then you have to rework the story to fit that.
Yeah, and just so everybody knows, I think it's helpful to know, in the 20-day shoot, we were in the house for 15 days.
Wow.
Out of the 20.
Wow.
So
okay.
That's an incredible achievement on 20 days. It really is.
Thank you.
Caroline, have you got any? I know you had loads of questions. I've still got questions, but do you want
I was just running through the comments to make sure I didn't miss anything at the moment, actually. But I think also something is, how did you, because I think we briefly talked about how Helen Hunt went very early on the project. how did you get like all the other amazing cast? Because you got like a pretty like amazing lineup in terms of cast. So how did they like get approached to the project? Were they also like before you join, or did
that was part of the casting process, like the 3 months leading up to the shoot, you know, reading, you know, or meeting with actors. You know, it was really challenging to find them because there's such complicated roles. You know, you take Greg, it's like, you know, you don't want to give anything away with any of the characters, but all of them are at least 2 or 3 different characters. You know, they're who you think that they are. They're who they sort of reveal themselves to be. Then they're who they reveal themselves to be again. It's got to work when you first watch it. It's got to work in retrospect. So it's incredibly challenging to find that. And with Alec and Mindy, not only are you trying to find that, you know, with Alec, you're trying to find someone who your perception changes so drastically 3 times, I think, in the you know 45 minutes or whatever it is. But also he needs to fit with Mindy, you know. So you know, with them, Libe, you know, came in to read, you know, amongst, you know, we saw so many actors for Mindy and for Alec. And she just, you know, really, she sort of stuck in my head, and she was quite different to how I imagined the role, but I just couldn't sort of get her out of my head for it. And then Owen was one of the first people to come in, and then you see 50 others, you know, 60 others, whatever it is, you know, you just keep seeing people, you know, and then it keeps coming back, and then you do pairings, and then, you know, and that's how we found them. And with John, you know, I'd seen his work, and then I met with him and we talked about it. And it just sort of came together in that way, you know. Same with Judah, who is, you know, plays Connor, who's just such a great young actor, and then Sam and Greg and all the supporting cast, you know. So it was just a sort of traditional process in a way. You know, we had Helen, who was obviously a massive draw for actors, you know. So you've got that, and you've got a great script. You're in a really strong position to go out to actors.
Was there anyone specific you had in mind when you first read the script, or is that?
I mean, actually, there wasn't, you know, but you know, it's a difficult question anyway, because if there was, you don't want to, you know.
Yeah, that's why I held off a little bit.
You know,
yeah, well, I think, you know, sort of
himself, I think.
Yeah, no, I also did sort of stand on Adam's answer there. You know, Helen was the first piece of cast that we attached to the film. So, you know, we were able to get that caliber of cast with the resources that we had because people really wanted to work with Helen. Obviously, they liked the material, and then obviously Adam's impression on them, of course, is, you know, so it's all those things working in conjunction with one another help. And then all of a sudden, then you have the whole logistical elements, right? Because you're filming on location. John Tenney was in the middle of filming True Detective, so we had to fly him, you know, by private jet from HBO to Arkansas, right? I think Owen Teague had to go leave.
For the private jet, just we're talking about a low budget film, and
yeah, right. But so we're getting these calls. You know, we're already pressed for so much time anyway, and we're trying to make our project, and we're getting calls from the actors' managers, and they're saying, hey, you know, we need to lose this guy for a day and a half. And now we're going to Adam and our first ADs, and they're redoing the strips to see if we can accommodate it, which is just horrible. Honestly, it was just horrible. Yeah. But thankfully, yeah, I mean, so Helen came on board first, and then I think, you know, we had to retrofit also the creative then to follow our casting, because the role of Jackie was younger, and then, you know, I think they were in their 30s, Adam, maybe that had changed by the time you were involved. But, you know, and then of course Judah originally was, you know, he was like a second grader, and then now,
yeah, he was like what, 8 or 10 or something originally.
Yeah, the opening of the film is he's, you know, put together.
I mean, it works so much better that he's older.
Right. Yeah, he's
the right himself, you know, which was something that we sort of really played with.
Yeah. Yeah. So all of those things sort of working together, you know, you're really honestly like sort of navigating it almost day to day in a lot of ways.
Mm-hmm.
They're terrific cast, though. They're really, really good in all of them, everyone. Question here from Aaron: do you plan to make any more movies in the horror genre in the future? What's your feeling about the horror genre? Have you got any favorites? Do you want to keep in this sphere?
Who, me?
Either of you?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I love the horror genre. I mean, I love a lot of genres, you know. And what was sort of so interesting about this, as we talked about, was that it sort of straddles different genres and goes from genre to genre. You know, like I'd like to make horrors that, you know, I'm not sure whether I'd be drawn to traditional horror anymore. You know, if there was a way of, you know, playing around with it. I think what horror is now has become so fascinating. In a way, it's the most exciting genre there is now. You know, I mean, it's the only genre I think other, you know, you've got your superhero comic book movies, but the only movies that you can make that can be really interesting and bold and still make money and find an audience is horror now. You know, Hereditary, or, you know, It Follows and Get Out, and, you know, Midsummer, if you call that horror, you know, which I thought was incredible. So, you know, in that world, I think it's absolutely, you know, I mean, you know, and then The Shining and The Exorcist, and, you know, the classics, obviously some of my favorite films ever made. But so I think, you know, in that way, it's the most interesting genre now, which is interesting because when I was a teenager and whatever, horror had a totally different thing. Horror was a bit schlocky, you know. There was good horrors, but it was much more like the B movies, whereas now it's really like, you know, a movie, you know, the best quality genre movies are now horror.
And yourself, Matt?
Yeah, I would agree with that. I was not a horror fan growing up. I would get totally scared, you know. So I'm not like a horror head, which I think actually is helpful when approaching horror material, to be a little bit agnostic of that, because I'm deeply affected by that genre. So I think it's helpful to. I think I have a good sort of nose for it as not being a fan of the horror genre, or growing up a fan of the horror genre. I totally agree with Adam. I think it's by far the most interesting stuff happening. I definitely like the horror as reality sort of piece of the genre. I also like messing around with sort of format in the way that it's presented, which, you know, you can go all the way back to Blair Witch, right, which is sort of ushered in sort of the new age of found footage. But you look at a movie called Searching, you know, that's taking place entirely sort of in this format that we're looking at right now. And I think you're going to see a lot of that just with the COVID restrictions. I think, again, sort of getting back to sort of the point that Adam made with the restrictions that are put on you from a production and logistical, you know, elements and financial, for talented people, that if you're lucky enough to get everyone on the same page and you can communicate sort of effectively and get everybody pulling in the same direction, I think it can lead to a lot of exciting innovation. And that's something that I'm kind of looking forward to about sort of, I guess, the next 6 to 18 months, is to see what sort of innovations filmmakers are going to find. You know, because I really do subscribe to the sort of just necessity is the mother of all invention. I really do believe that. So I think, you know, to Adam's point, and just with everything that's happening in the world, it's going to be, I think, kind of a fertile ground for sort of horror is reality sort of films, because that genre and sci-fi, I think, always sort of reflects society's fears in sort of a meta way, you know. So we'll start to see that sort of trickling and moving way, and we'll see that as the scripts start to come in as well. I think it's so new and fresh that, you know, creative hasn't caught up to it yet, but we'll start to see that soon.
Great. Another question here from Daniel. Do you ever read movie reviews on a film you've made, or do you prefer not to read reviews?
I do. I mean, it's really not a healthy way to be. Really shouldn't. As I said, like we premiered the film, and the first 2 reviews that came through, which were like, you know, website reviews, and they just sort of shadowed over it, and it was just. I mean, I just remember just lying on the bed, just going, "That's it." You know, I didn't want to leave. Like, you just think everyone's going to hate it, then, you know, because it's like you don't know yet, and obviously, like. Fine if some people don't like it and some people do. The thing you're afraid of is that nobody will like it, because you can't argue with that, you know. So it's difficult. You know, sometimes you read a review that's critical and actually so there's things you agree with. You know, it's not like, you know, I think the film is perfect. What's difficult is when they make an assumption that isn't true to what it was. Like saying, you know, a film like I remember a review saying the influence of Hereditary or something, you know, which hadn't seen until the film was completely, you know, we were actually like deep into the edit when that came out, you know, and so it's that sort of thing where it's, you know, frustrating. But generally, I think it's not a good idea, but I do it anyway. You know, it's certainly not healthy. But it's very nice to read. You know, you slave over these things and take so much out of you that to just hit. You just want to hear that people like it, you know, or have something to say about it, or you know, with the Arrow Blu-ray release with the booklet, that's like a sort of a film geek's dream, you know, to get a nice Blu-ray with a nice essay written in it and a booklet. Yeah, and that was so, particularly after the US release, which was sort of like, you know, just sort of landed with nothing, you know, and had I don't want to say had the worst artwork of anything I can ever, you know, and it was really, you know, disappointing in that way. You know, what you want is you know, not necessarily compliments, but some, you know, interesting feedback.
Yeah, thanks so much to you guys and Arrow. I mean, for you know, I just checked out the Blu-ray, and I mean, it was just so nice and validating and refreshing to like see what the movie really deserves. You know, see it get what it really deserves, and you know, it's been you know, obviously. It's sort of like it's like your kid, you know, you want the best for your kid. It's like, it's no different really. And then when it comes to the reviews, like I'm the wrong guy to ask about that, because I obviously believe that it's fantastic, and there's no way that the film gets made if I don't think that it's totally fantastic, and it has to be done, you know, like it's just, because you're the first person as the producer, you're just the first person that has to sell everybody on the idea, and that it's a good way to spend your time and blood, sweat, and tears. So, so I could give a shit about the reviews, honestly, that are negative at first, because I don't think it was clear to me. Obviously, it's much different for Adam as an artist, like, seeing that. But it's clear to me, sort of, from an intellectual point of view, that those early reviews were not understanding what we were trying to do. And we still see that, you know, like the film was never going to be, you know, 90 points on Rotten Tomatoes, because there are going to be some people, it's an unconventional film, you know, and it's going to be polarizing. And the word that Adam was always using was bold. You know, the decision making is bold, you know, the POV shift is bold. And that was something that alone makes it worthwhile to me, even if it was poorly reviewed. The fact that you made something unique and bold is you know, something that you worked on for, you know, 4.5 years, that we were done actually getting all the raw materials for in 20 days. I mean, it's kind of crazy. So anyway, thanks to you guys for putting together an amazing Blu-ray and all those extras and everything else.
Not at all. No, we're thrilled to have the film on our label. I think we should get close to wrapping up. It's been over an hour. It's been amazing to talk to you. But genuinely,
Caroline's.
Oh, go on then, Caroline. You go for another question.
She's hot to ask questions.
Yeah, sorry, I really got that question because we were talking about reviews and all the discussion since the film has been, like, you know, shown in festival and everything. Did you get still some hints or Easter eggs or stuff that you really wanted to put in the film as Easter eggs for the audience that you've realized that no one picked up on till now, without revealing any of the plot or anything? But is there still very specific things that you're still amazed that people hasn't realized that for you was so obvious?
I have a few, but go ahead, Adam.
No, I'm just thinking, I mean, somebody really recently, I think they tweeted or something about the color green, which was something I was obsessed with in this film to do, which would almost tell you the story if you look closely at who was wearing green and what was green and what rooms were green, you know. And that was something that I'd almost forgotten about, you know, and then somebody mentioned it, and so I was really sort of happy about that someone had spotted that. It's sort of difficult now. I can't quite remember. Is there something, Matt, that you can think of?
Oh, well, I was going to mention the green motif. But then there are actual, if the timing of, the dialogue, the audio plus the visual, where, Adam in a couple of spaces is essentially telling the audience,
There's things that are very
who the killer is, right?
Yeah, there's certainly certain cuts where it cuts to something after someone said something that basically just tells you the whole story. If you want to, that no one has actually picked up, which is good because you don't want them to, and there's a sequence after Greg and Jackie are in the bedroom and they're having a sort of argument, and then she's downstairs looking at the ocean and at the lake, and he's on his bed and he's sort of staring seemingly at nothing, but actually he's staring at the door. That was very much meant to sort of mean something about how they both feel of each other, what she's actually looking at in the ocean. There's something in the distance that, coming towards her that's supposed to sort of, I guess, be a metaphor for the thing that she most fears. I can't really say because I don't want to give anything away. But again, what he's looking at and why he gets so freaked out when he's locked in the wardrobe, and then later on in the trailer when there's sort of locked wardrobes again. There's like certain motifs I think that we're trying to, in a way, like explain a little bit of his kind of motivation and his backstory of when he was younger, and then also Jackie's subconscious, which is a huge thing of like the fact that she knows the truth subconsciously. That's how I felt when I read it. I was like, what must it be like, knowing that truth, but being unable to admit it to yourself, but then making decisions in your life that are so destructive because you just need some sort of escape.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and also Adam, the way that he shot it, where if you just move the frame over, 6 feet, it tells a totally different story, right? So there are a couple of Easter eggs in there where
I thought of one, but it's going to give something away, so please don't.
Oh yeah. But, well, anyway, look at I think the background is just as important as the foreground as a good Easter egg.
I'm going to say one, because why not? So Jackie hears the records playing upstairs, and she goes and turns the record off, and Connor comes downstairs and she asks him if he was on the roof, and behind him is the cupboard in the kitchen, and it's slightly transparent, and if you look, you can actually see that Alec is standing there. You can see him in the first half. You can see the shape of his face, and we did it so that I was experimenting with how close can he get, where you can get the idea that he's there if you've seen it before, but without giving it away and going, so we really like to like a centimeter was like, okay, just a tiny bit more forward. So you can actually see him if you look standing there. There's a couple of times like that. And then as Matt says, there's a lot of times where later in the film, the camera just, the edit normally starts 10 seconds earlier or finishes 10 seconds later. And it just totally transforms, what the scene is about and whose side you're on.
Yeah, and Arrow, I don't know, maybe it's something for you to think about. I actually did think about doing like a viewing party and doing I See You bingo, Okay. So since all the objects are so important, you could have sunflower mug and Alec in the cupboard, and you could watch it and have a few drinks or whatever you need, do a little I See You bingo. So
we'll do a board game, and I See You Arrow board game.
I'm into it
next year for sure.
I'm into it.
Caroline, have you got any more questions?
Nope, sorry, that's fine. That's okay. I don't want to take up more than your time. That's fine. Sorry, but I really wanted to ask this one, so that's why. But yeah, thank you so much for your time, and I start working on the board game then and those kind of things. So
okay, perfect.
I want one of the masks. The masks are great. Did you find the mask, or did you design the mask?
We designed it. In the script, it was actually an frog emoji mask.
Right.
That Matt loved because it was for marketing. He was going to send out little emojis. But I guess the difficult was it needed to be a frog, but it wanted to be frightening, but it also didn't want to be, why would he just have this incredibly weird, frightening mask? So the balance of that. So the idea was like he found it in some flea market. So I was just Googling frog masks and then found this African mask. And then I gave that to the art department and we talked about it, and then they came up with lots of different designs, and then we sort of created that one.
Which really currently working on merchandising deal for that. We'll see if it happens.
Oh yeah?
Oh yeah. We'll see.
Nice. It's been genuinely a pleasure to have you both on. And as I say, we're genuinely honoured to have the film on our label. You know, we really look for the best genre films that we can find, the coolest. And we definitely see ICU as one of those well up there. It's a terrific film. If you're watching and you haven't seen it yet, please do go out and see it. Otherwise, thank you so much for joining us, director Adam Randall and producer Matt Waldeck.
Very much.
Thanks so much. Cheers.
No worries.
Bye.
Take care.
Enjoy your weekend. Thank you.